So now there isn't just one Buddha, there's many Buddhas. Buddhas are not, so it's not like there's one Buddha who's like a god and he creates everything. Buddha is simply the state we get to once our mind has reached its highest level of development. That's what a Buddha is. Yeah. So the teachings that we receive when we come along to meditation classes at Nagarjuna Center, they're all coming from Buddhist lineage. Yeah. So they all go back to Buddhist lineage, so that we are receiving Buddhist teachings which still apply to our modern world. Okay? So it's quite interesting, because when I give the story of him, you'll think, well, actually, I don't think that is me. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read his story. Okay. And what I want you to think is, see if you can see yourself in this story. Yeah. And then I'm going to convince you afterwards, yeah, that you are this person in this story. Right? Okay. So here we are. So we'll start with him as a young prince. So first of all, he was a young prince. He grew up, he mastered all the traditional arts and sciences without needing any instruction. He knew a lot of languages. He was very skillful at mathematics. In addition, he studied various academic subjects. He became skilled at sports, such as martial arts and archery. And the prince would take every opportunity to convey spiritual meanings and to encourage others to follow spiritual paths. At one time, when he was taking part in an archery contest, he declared, with the bow of meditative concentration, I will fire the arrow of wisdom and kill the tiger of ignorance in living beings. He then released the arrow, and it flew straight through 5 iron tigers and 7 trees before disappearing into the earth. By witnessing demonstrations such as this, thousands of people developed faith in the prince. Okay, can you see yourself yet? You see yourself? Just hang on, it's coming. Anyway, so sometimes Prince Siddhartha would go into the capital city of his father's kingdom to see how the people lived. Okay, so at this point, he's a teenager, and just like any teenager, he decides that, I want out of this house and I'm going to go downtown. So he goes downtown. His parents aren't pleased about it, but he goes in anyway to see how the people lived. And during these visits, he came in contact with many old people and sick people, and on one occasion he saw a corpse. These encounters left a deep impression on his mind and led him to realize that all living beings, without exception, have to experience the sufferings of birth, sickness, aging, and death. Because he understood the laws of reincarnation, he also realized that living beings experience these sufferings not just once, but again and again in life after life without cessation. Seeing how all living beings are trapped in the circle of suffering, he felt deep compassion for them, and he developed a sincere wish to free all of them from their suffering. Realizing that only a fully enlightened Buddha had the wisdom and the power to help all living beings in this way, he resolved to leave the palace and retire to the solitude of the forest, where he would engage in profound meditation until he attained enlightenment. So when the people where he lived realized that he intended to leave the palace, they requested the king to arrange a marriage for him in hope that this would cause him to change his mind, which the king did. However, even though he remained in the palace as a royal prince, he devoted all his time and energy to serving the people in whatever way he could. But when he was 29 years old, the prince had a vision in which all the Buddhas of the 10 directions appeared to him and spoke in unison, saying, "Previously you resolved to become a conqueror Buddha so that you could help all living beings trapped in the cycle of suffering. Now is the time for you to accomplish this." The prince went immediately to his parents and told them of his intention. "I wish to retire to a peaceful place in the forest where I can engage in deep meditation and quickly attain full enlightenment. Once I've attained enlightenment, I'll be able to repay the kindness of all living beings, especially the great kindness that you have shown me." So he requested permission to leave. When his parents heard this, they were shocked, and the king refused to grant his permission. Prince Siddhartha said to his father, "Father, if you can give me permanent freedom from the sufferings of birth, sickness, aging and death, I will stay in the palace. But if you cannot, I must leave and make my human life meaningful." Okay, so even though the king tried to stop him, he wasn't able to. And eventually the prince left, and he ordained himself as a monk. And so then he made his way to a place near Bodh Gaya in India, where he found a suitable site for meditation. There he remained, emphasizing a meditation called space-like concentration on the Dharmakaya, in which he focused single-pointedly on the ultimate nature of all phenomena. After training in this meditation for 6 years, he realized that he was very close to attaining full enlightenment, so he walked to Bodh Gaya, where on the full moon, day of the 4th month, the lunar calendar, he seated himself beneath the Bodhi tree in the meditation posture and vowed not to rise from meditation until he had attained perfect enlightenment. With this determination, he entered the space-like concentration on the Dharmakaya. So many maras or difficulties arose around him to prevent him, but he just stayed steadfast in his concentration. He continued. So all sorts of appearances appeared, terrifying weapons, beautiful women, all sorts of things trying to take him away from his spiritual path, but he refused. And he continued with his meditation until he attained the Vajra-like concentration, which is the very last mind of a human being, and he removed the final veils of ignorance from his mind, and then the next moment he became a Buddha. Okay, so it's quite interesting, I think, the story of Buddha, because when you first hear that story, it doesn't sound like us at all. Do you think? Really? Did you see yourself in that? You trying? You think, no good at archery, no good at martial arts, not got any concentration. Okay? But it is quite interesting, because if we put it another way, we've got a lad here who's grown up in a country where he's pretty much had access to whatever he needed. Yeah? And everybody around him was just encouraging him to pursue his material world. Yeah? Telling him that that's how he'd be happy. Yeah? He had a good heart, so he was always kind, so generally we're pretty good people, so we always try to do our best with whatever conditions we've got. But then as the longer he lived and the more he saw, the more he realised that having all these good conditions, it wasn't going to put an end to sickness. It wasn't going to put an end to death. It wasn't going to put the end to aging and to rebirth, because he believed in reincarnation. So he saw this, didn't he? He saw this directly. He saw the sufferings of others. And moved by this, he then looked at his material world, didn't he? And he said, well, look, if you can give me permanent liberation and permanent peace, I will stay here. But if you can't, then I need to find the way to experience permanent freedom from suffering and be able to help others to do the same. Yeah? And then that's what he did. He just dedicated his life to doing that. So we're not so different to that. We have a life, or we've had a life where we've had access to various things, good education, etc., at whatever levels we've had access to. We live in a part of the country where, materially we do okay, yeah? We're encouraged by our peers, our friends and our family to do as well as we can materially, because that's what's important, that's where we'll be happy. But we know through our own experience that no matter how much we dedicate ourselves to this pursuit alone, there's something missing. And even if we pretend that we're doing okay, then someone we love dies, somebody we love gets sick, somebody's aging, or we're getting sick, we're aging, yeah, we're aware we're dying. So what good is having a beautiful house and a lot of money in a bank and a wonderful family? It doesn't put an end to all those things and the suffering that it brings. So for us, we can say, like, for Siddhartha, he had a spiritual awakening, didn't he? He just realised, and it wasn't that he was surrounded by other people who all realised it as well, right? So your awakening doesn't necessarily happen when you're surrounded by lots of other people who think the same. And I think it's very similar for us as modern people. We're living in a world where it's very, very materially motivated. And we're so encouraged to be happy through ordinary methods. And yet nobody is, but still we keep pursuing it. So like Buddha, it takes a lot of courage. So he had to run from his people in order to do it. But, it takes a lot of courage to actually think, you know what? I'm not going to dedicate my life to this stuff that actually doesn't give me the answers that I need. What I need is permanent freedom from suffering. I want to be happy, and I want to be able to share that experience with others. So we're just like him, and that's what brings us into places like this. We might not be aware of that, but there's something that we're looking for, isn't it, that we can't find in Sainsbury's, even though we're looking on all the shelves, we can't find it out there. We can't find it in our families. We can't find it with our friends. We can't find it in our work. We can't find it in our wardrobe. And it's not saying that we can't have all those things. It's not that isn't the story. That isn't for us. We're not. Even though Buddha chose to move away from his family and friends at that time to achieve that level of concentration. He obviously was a lot more advanced than what we are. We're not ready for that. So we live amongst our family and our friends, etc. But inwardly, we've retreated because we're taking a different stance to what is meaningful for us in this modern world. And it is a spiritual awakening. So we are walking in the footsteps of Buddha.